GMDX is a modification liked by many for the gaming classic and OG legend DSX. It has gone through many iterative changes throughout its lifespan, with features being added, removed, and revised as it was deemed appropriate. However, production stopped after version 9's release, with the author being unable to continue maintaining the project. This was unfortunate, as version 9 in itself had a good number of issues still in need of being remedied. The reins of GMDX were passed on to an associate of the author, an entity by the name of Rosadude. Rosadude is actively working on his own derivative for GMDX, sometimes called RosaDX, and while its additions are very interesting, they don't maintain a rigid respect for vanilla, with considerable changes in the spirit of the mod having been pursued. And honestly, that's perfectly fine. Rosso has never claimed to maintain vanilla to a T, with many of his changes targeting balancing or immersion focus, instead of a strict rigidity for the original game's design style. Still, for lovers of GMDX version 9, the call for mopping up, improvement, and maximum faithfulness to vanilla has so far gone unanswered. With this objective in mind, we, the maintenance men, have targeted GMDX's design assets for as much refining and improvement as we can squeak in, and in as many areas as we can practically manage. The team is already well stocked with members experienced in mapping, sound design, code work, modeling, and texture composition. Some of these fields are a breath of relief, as the original GMDX version 9 team was minimally equipped for texture and model composition, and not equipped at all to deal with sound design. Code and mapping were built with solid objectives in mind, but the architecture is in need of improvement and renovation, as many of its allies and crevices have been built upon and added onto over the 5 or so years of GMDX's core development. This has led to a lot of sections in need of polishing or fixing due to either their age or lack of time to have them workshop, given the abrupt end to the mod's development. While we can't claim that every single version 9 user ever will prefer GMDX version 10, or even like it for that matter, we do have a solid set of bullet points as to why fans of version 9 should give it a swing. Firstly, let me open by stating that one of version 10's best attributes is that it has an installer that has been specifically engineered to not override any of version 9's files. It uses its own launcher and directory, so if you try version 10 but don't enjoy it, you can simply delete the directory to uninstall it, and then go back to using version 9's original launcher shortcut. No reverting files by hand, making backups, or anything else that might impose any sense of one or the other. With version 10's installation, you can totally keep both. Next, version 10 has done a great job, at least in terms of raw numbers, of improving GMDX's performance as a whole. Previously, oversights in the code wasted exorbitant amounts of processing power unnecessarily, and many large files were forcefully bound to the core files of the game, causing a very large amount of RAM to be used, when this didn't have to be the case. While most modern PCs don't have an issue running version 9, performance hangups weren't unheard of by any means, and some users who played version 9 were doomed to be locked at abnormally low frame rates, relative to the expectations of DSX. While version 10's performance requirements are still considerably higher than that of the base game, some of our test users have already reported a massive relief in terms of PC stress. One user in particular was the sufferer of the low performance edge case and saw a leap from the 40s range of frames per second to a clean, crisp 60 plus frames per second almost completely across the board. If that doesn't scream improvement, I honestly don't know what does. To the technically knowledge, many of the new mapping additions in GMDX were not up to scratch. Most areas were based on, or actually were, sections from the original DSX game. And it's good that GMDX stuck to the original layout for maps, for more than one reason. However, in a couple of cases, version 9 strayed from truly faithful map design by reconfiguring major sections of maps and changing how they played, momentarily forgetting one of its most important pledges. After all, this is one of the defining differences between GMDX's identity and that of the revision mod, which some GMDX fans have historically drawn issue with for this exact style of editing being done to maps. Further yet, small, newer sections that were added to enhance exploration often suffer from inconsistent design quality, overly simple geometry, bad proportions, and other glaring technical issues. Some areas that were modified in the original map space also suffered similar issues, or were modified in ways that didn't make sense according to the original vanilla intentions for map architecture and function. Unfortunately, these areas have demonstrated the learning experience that has occurred along GMDX's production, as well as the somewhat underdeveloped mapping ability of some of the original contributors. Many fans have been wonderful enough to not sweat these details, but many of the detail-oriented, especially on our team, have seen these areas as ripe for improvement and remastering. As such, we think you'll love to see some of the further enhancements to the artistic direction of GMDX we've tugged away at to bring a concise and polished final product. GMDX has laid claim to a strict adherence to vanilla story and world as much as possible, while still presenting new and enhanced features, including many targeting difficulty. However, a key few of the expanded features, and in particular its broad roster of enemies, have made explicit violations to the lore, technology, and timeline of Deus Ex's world, creating major breaks from what vanilla set out to define itself to be. While many have intended explanations according to the author's commentary on such matters, they don't pass a hard round of fact-checking, and as such, we've done our best to make amends with vanilla while still not completely flushing the intended mechanical changes. One of GMDX's other goals was to become one of the most comprehensive bug-fixing mods for Deus Ex. While vanilla rarely has game-breaking bugs or softlocks, rarely it's not good enough for what players deserve. Likewise, GMDX itself, while a step forward for the most part, left many key bugs unfixed, falling behind competing bug-fixing mods, while also accidentally injecting new bugs and unpolished features into the frame of the game. In version 10, we've targeted every unfixed bug we could think of and have brought it even further ahead in terms of key improvements. Additionally, we've polished many of the rougher behaviors with AI, and sometimes weapons or augmentations, in an attempt to make the technical changes less glaring to the keen-eyed. Finally, we made an explicit effort to bug check every single new feature made by version 9 and previous GMDX versions, in an attempt to pull some of the minuses out of the mod's potential bug fix category. Some of these bugs include things like UNACO troops having helmets that don't work properly, NPCs sometimes spawning fire extinguishers on the floor beneath them when throwing grenades, weapon appearance sometimes horribly mangling itself in proximity to the new cloak code depending on how and when the user saved the game, unconscious people that were killed did not actually die according to the game's flags, causing no change in story or dialogue outcome. Have you ever noticed that GMDX's helmet detection always treats the helmet's coverage as if it's from the front? Well, now it's fully accurate at almost any angle. Have you ever wondered why animals have been left incapable of being headshot with only rearwards attacks dealing bonus damage? Well now, unique hitboxes exist per animal, including headshot capability. Has the power balancing for laser sights or scopes bestowing instantly perfect pinpoint accuracy ever made you question the purpose of accuracy mods? We've wondered this too and have kept them as considerable, powerful upgrades, without leaping straight to flawless weapon performance. Examples like these are some of the things we looked at in version 9. At no point should users have to look at what can be and stop their dreaming at version 9's borders. In version 10, we've targeted a few glaring areas that still lack modernization or depth of function in version 9, and expanded upon the game in ways that can help shake off a sense of rust or a lack of polish, all for the sake of bringing the game forward another couple of hurdles, for a truly deep, quality experience in ways version 9 had originally lacked. This is not a comfortable thing to have listed here, but in short, GMDX had a large number of appropriated assets taken from Deus Ex mods, IDOS games, non-IDOS games, and so forth within its content. It's not uncommon at all for a mod to have a few taken assets lying around, but GMDX's headcount is exceptional, totaling somewhere around 24 different sources that have had their contents inside the mod, quite often without the grace of the parties they were taken from. Many of these are unnecessary, or have even added a considerable web of extra file size to the mod, with the unused of the taken assets stacking up to over 80 megabytes on their own. In case you're curious about said taken assets, here is a list of all sources we believe GMDX has taken assets from. Many of these were discovered during version 10's development, and we've tried to verify their taking status along the way. However, we legitimately do not have the time to run through all the different sources here, so this will have to do. If you have questions about any of these, the team would be glad to elaborate, as no claim here is without some degree of substance. On this topic, however, while we on the version 10 team think it's fantastic that fans are willing to overlook the imperfections of a mod and accept its positive newer features, at some point the line has to be drawn. In the version 10 team, we jettisoned many of these stolen assets while replacing them with what we deem to be acceptable or sometimes even improved replacement assets, many of which we developed entirely in-house. No more skeletons in the closet. With the advent of version 10, GMDX stands more on its own merits than that of the other mods in the games, and if that wasn't enough, its own merits have been advanced significantly along the way to version 10.